Jude. What are you looking at? That's just some website I used to be a part of. It's no really big deal. I should get that on my bookmarks at some point. Huh? Oh, don't worry about it. You got nothing wrong with that. It's just a past I want to forget about right now. Wait a minute. How were you able to know my password?
Standing in the middle of nowhere, wondering how to begin. Lost between tomorrow and yesterday, between now and then. Back where you started, here we go round again. Back where you started, come on, do it again, do it again, do it again. Back where we started, here we go round again. Day after day I get up and I say, do it again, do it again, do it again. Day after day I get up and I say, come on, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again.
Much like with A Christmas Carol and Sherlock Holmes, I always thought Kenneth Grahame's novel The Wind of the Willows had plenty of material for a big screen adaptation. The idea of having anthropomorphic creatures as the leads for a novel was a very new concept back then for the early 20th century. The characters are not too difficult to understand, the story is well paced, and it provides unique satire to how technology can mess with our modern-day way of living. But much to my surprise, there appears to be more made-for-TV adaptations than there are of movie adaptations. And I kind of wonder why that is. There are many different angles you can take this from and still create something unique and enchanting for your viewers. Well, apparently, as of this episode, there exists only 2 big-screen adaptations. And judging from what I got behind me, can you guess which one of them we're looking at today?
Boom, 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 boom.
Think about it, Mr. Toad.
Why am I not surprised? I mean, arguably, Walt Disney's version is the most remembered in the public eye. It does manage to take some liberties with the source, while still being respectful of the story. Personally, I thought the Sleepy Hollow segment was better. But their take on The Wind in the Willows is still faithful nonetheless. Does this mean I'm the only kid in America that grew up on the Terry Jones adaptation? Yep, the late Terry Jones decided to adapt the famous children's novel, and honestly, I feel like it's a match. Terry Jones always had a great hand on writing for fantasy. Well, almost. It's interesting because when Terry was approached with the idea to direct, he turned it down. But after reading the book, he changed his mind and liked the idea of seeing England in a state before it got lost in the Industrial Revolution. In fact, the idea of a Monty Python member doing their own take on children's literature lends itself to many possibilities. You have a book that a lot of people know that is given a more heightened and zany take. And considering how few know about this 1996 adaptation, does that make Terry Jones' version a lost classic? Or is there a reason as to why not too many people know about it? The first thing I want to get out of the way that really stands out is the technical work. Good gravy, this is one of the best looking 1990 movies that I have seen, which offers some good eye candy. The colors are vibrant, the shots of the forest look cool, and once in a while there's a visual gag that is kind of clever. This was released in a time before feature films relied heavily on CGI sets, and to see actual buildings and old school matte painting effects are just great. Once in a while there's a computer effect, but it's very minor and it doesn't get in the way. They go so far as to have actual working machines from the 20th century in this feature that were still working at the time. Those cars you see there, those are actual antique cars. And this might be a minor spoiler, but a certain plane that is seen at the end of the movie was built from scratch. It was reconstructed from actual 20th century blueprints, and it could fly. The attention to detail here is just amazing. For the £9.7 million they spent on this movie, which I recall correctly in American money is $12.7 million, it's impressively well spent, to say the least. So, what about the cast? Well, in comparison to the other adaptations, including those for television, I would say this is probably my second favorite casting next to the 1995 animated version. Steve Coogan really channels the timid nature of Mole and captures the weak nature of the character. Coogan does a real convincing job making you believe this is someone who has lived underground for a long time. They also give him a small character arc that actually works in the film's favor. Throughout the movie, Mole is placed in many perilous situations and questions if the world is really that bad as it appears. At times, he gets to see the beauty and the horror it can bring. It works perfectly in the final moments when he realizes that it's a friendship that makes the world look better in his view.
Give me the gun, and we'll all be friends.
Friends? I thought you said there was no such thing.
Oh, come on, that was just an intro to a song.
Eric Idle, another Monty Python alumni, is actually good in the role of Ratty. It's one of those few times I can recall where the character is quiet and kind of subdued. In the book, Ratty always viewed the river as his personal home, and you get a sense of that here. I especially like it when he gets cross and it causes his whiskers to wrinkle.
Oh, mind the varnish? I haven't been in a boat before.
What?
You've never been in a... Well, shiver me whiskers. You poor creature.
There's also Nicole Williamson as Badger, who I pray is not haunting this show, who is also probably my favorite interpretation of the character. He's grumpy, stern, fierce, and at times knows when to be kind-hearted. As much as I enjoy Bob Hoskins' take in the 2006 BBC version and Michael Gambon in the 1995 animated version, they always felt a bit too cold at times. That's not to say I don't enjoy those performances, but you never got a sense Badger had patience for anyone else who wasn't, well, given the name Toad. Williams' version acts more like a hard-boiled father that knows how to treat a spoiled brat right, and when to treat a caring character rightfully.
You've squandered the money your father left you.
Haven't. There's tons of it.
Your father was a particular friend of mine, Toad. And I promised him on his deathbed that I would ensure that you looked after your inheritance.
I'm only having a bit of fun.
Perhaps you'd like to visit my fiery furnace.
That, and I just love how catatonic he gets in certain scenes. I don't know why, it just cracks me up sometimes.
Yesterday, Mole End. Tomorrow, Toad Hall. Today, they're in the Wildwood. No. No, I can't have that.
While that is all nice, what about our spam for the evening? Well, not only does Terry Jones write and direct, but he also takes on the role of Toad as well. In the original story, Toad is a wealthy millionaire who goes through one fad after another. One minute he is boating, and then giving up for caravanning.
The dusty highway! It's the hedgerow and rolling down! Here, up and off to somewhere else tomorrow! Ooh, finest car ever built! Oh, designed it myself, of course. And we can set off after lunch.
All I can certainly say is Toad is truly the salesman when he comes to selling caravans. Would you rather have someone like this trying to sell you something?
The accoutrement that you will need. Accoutrement? What is that shit? I don't know, shit. It's just all gone. I get so goddamn diuretic when I sit here, and my mouth just never stops.
While having a simple quirk, Mr. Toad is not an easy character to portray. There are times when he can be friendly, but also conceited. He can have a kind heart and care for friends, but he can also be childish and selfish. You either feel annoyed by the choices he makes, or wish to see him be changed at the end. Thankfully, and much like in the book, Toad does learn how consequential his actions are and tries to turn over a new leaf by the end. But the journey to get him there might turn some off. You have Toad going through all these crazy fads and manias for the sake of interest, but the lengths he goes to in order to satisfy his interests are where some people might dislike this character. To compare, in the animated Disney version, Toad sells the deed to Toad Hall in order to get a motor car. The fact that someone is so desperate to the point they could sell their own home for a car can be seen as silly and innocent. In the movie, it starts with Mole's home getting destroyed by the weasels, and later on, it's revealed that Toad carelessly sold the land where Mole lives in order to get a caravan.
Toad!
Oh, don't start lecturing me.
You know perfectly well the weasels are after Toad Hall.
It was only a meadow.
It was Mole's home.
Oh, poor, you worry too much, Ratty.
That was really stupid.
That's why I said adapting a character like this is very difficult. You want to make him someone you want to root for, but also wag a finger at the same time.
I would just like to wag my finger at the accused a few times.
Certainly, certainly.
The best comparison I can think of that works is Ash from the Evil Dead series. He knows he needs to be a hero and save the day, but he's also a coward. He's not a complete jerk, but also selfish. Some viewers might be put off, but I say, stick around. They'll get their just desserts in the end. And the more I think about Toad spending his money like that, it's only one to wonder what it would have been like if he met up with Scrooge McDuck. Oh, Clad, what are you doing spending all your revenues like that? You should know better than just to save it up. Well, yes, but as you all know, the will of enjoying life is to spend once more. After all, I can't help but try out all those lovely motor cars that are out there. I mean, this is the wild-go-lucky 20th century. Things should be appreciated for what they are. Ah, you don't understand, lad. With all of those insurance rates out there, you at least must hold on to something. Oh yes, I certainly should, and I shall. My certain sense of dignity and will of adventure. Is that more worth your value than all of what you got in your inheritance? Have you heard about this fad called roller skating? Ah, blow me bagpipes, you're a lost cause. The plot of Terry Jones' version follows the book very closely. Toad gets a craze for motor cars and jumps into the fad in a very quick cutaway.
Oh, bliss! Oh, poop, poop! Toad, you idiot! Stop this car at once! I insist!
Toad gets so obsessed to the point his friends lock him in a room in hopes this fad will pass. As expected, it doesn't work. Toad breaks out, steals a motor car,
Whoa, what a beauty! Whoa, right!
Asshole!
and is sent to jail. The journey to get there is the same, but again, there are some liberties taken that might put off some folks. One of the biggest changes that some folks might feel on the fence about are the weasels. In the book, they were only an obstacle in the last third of the story. They take over Toad Hall and basically trash it. In the movie, their role is beefed up to be more villainous. Not only did they have their sights on Toad Hall, but the entire wide wood. This part might come as a spoiler, but it needs to be addressed. They build on Mole's home a dog food factory and plan to blow up Toad Hall so they can put in a slaughterhouse in its place. Their master plan is, you guessed it, take all the riverbank animals and turn them into dog food.
Of course!
And right with those past few sentences, you can exactly see the problems slowly lining up. That is, if you do think too much about it. I'm not a pediatrician for dogs, but feeding them this diet mix of rabbit, rat, toad, and who knows what else would be pretty unhealthy. But Okay, this is set in the late 20th century, I can let some of that slide. But how are you going to capture all these animals and trick them into this factory raises quite a lot of questions. All I can say is it's making me picture a dystopian future of the Wind of the Willows that's more like Soylent Green. There's also this underlining element by having the weasels become Nazis, and it's very weird.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
On first watch, this is not entirely noticeable, at least until the final third where they wear certain clothing and have some peculiar symbols. The idea for this actually came from the movie's production and costume designer, to which Terry Jones was okay with. Thankfully they don't say any phrases and their actions are not too close to what the Nazis did. Unless you counted the whole dog food factory subplot. But aside from that, it's subtly executed and not on the nose like some other certain productions. Anthony Sher plays the Chief Weasel, and he is an absolute delight to watch. Dare I say, he is probably one of the main reasons to see this movie. He channels between menace and camp to the point you can tell he is having a good time in this role. He can be psychologically damaging to our heroes in song.
Don't come walking in the wildwood if you haven't got a gun.
Slaps his lackeys around.
Why don't you tell him all our plans? Well, first we make Toad Hall a weasel-only area, and then we ban picnics along the whole riverbank. Garbage brain! It's meant to be a secret!
And really choose the scenery.
Chief, I'll make sure Toad doesn't forget about motor cars.
Yes, we have a plan.
I have a plan.
We both thought of it.
No, you didn't.
Just to do it.
While the motive is basic, Sher's performance is what saves his character from being a generic bad guy. He gets a lot of good laughs, too.
I object. One of those rabbits is a weasel.
No, I'm not. I'm a rabbit.
Is he a rabbit?
I'm a rabbit. Rabbit.
It adds to the over-the-top environment which will entertain viewers or turn some off. Terry Jones adds a very cartoony nature that clashes with the mature tone of the book, but still matches the level of fantasy and whimsy Grahame wrote. There are some visual gags with signs and sculptures that feel similar to a Looney Tunes cartoon that I enjoy. But then there are some parts of it that feel a little off-putting.
Tea time!
Whoa! Did the clock just talk?
I am on my way to us. Come with me.
And the river sings. Oh. At least the sun isn't.
Beautiful day.
If Michael Palin is the sun, then I'd hate to see what the moon looks like.
I saw the sun once, and it came past me really fast, and it was called the eclipse, and it came past. But as it came past, I licked his back. He doesn't know I licked his back. All on his yellow suit. I'm the moon.
Okay, that last one was from the Mighty Boosh. But seriously, wouldn't it be weird if it was like that? It's one thing to have cartoon physics, but talking objects might push the boundary for some. And yes, Michael Palin is the sun. I kinda like how sardonic he gets at times.
Better hurry. I'll be setting soon.
How far is it to Toad Hall?
Oh, a long way yet.
Oh.
Yes, I can see everything from up here. That's the great thing about being the sun.
Speaking of Monty Python, we also get John Cleese as Toad's lawyer. Despite his small screen time, he gets a couple of good laughs, but there is something about his character that seems familiar.
I understood that you were counsel for the defense.
Indeed I am, my lad, but his crime is so blackguardly that this is, in fact, the best defense that can be offered.
Yes, Mr. Leach?
Wendy, I wonder, when you say 5 to 7, Miss Gershwitz, how can you be so sure?
And of course, I can't forget to mention how funny Stephen Fry gets in his cameo as the judge during Toad's courtroom case.
Prisoner at the bar. It is the sentence of this court that you be taken hence to a place of lawful execution, there to be hanged. What?
You can't hang him, my lord.
Oh, well. In that case, I sentence you to as long in jail as I possibly can.
Oh, and on a small side note, we almost got Terry Gilliam as the River, but he had a busy schedule with 12 Monkeys, which is kind of strange, seeing though it's only a small singing part, but eh. Speaking of which, this version of Wind of the Willows has some songs here and there. While it's not a full-blown musical, some of the tunes they provide are charming and hum-worthy at best. Ratty's song messing about the river is calm and decent.
Wherever you go with the flow when you're messing about on the river.
Friends Is What We Is has a very Python-esque joy to it.
We were born on the same riverbank. What's mine is yours is his.
And Mr. Toad's conceited number is bouncy at best.
Now the world is held with heroes, as history books have showed, but never a name to go down to third compared with that of Toad.
But the one song everyone remembers more is the one the Weasels sing called Secret of Survival, and I can see why. The heart-pounding melody, the witty yet ominous lyrics, and the frightening imagery. The Weasels use this as a means to scare Mole into believing the world is a horrible place, and it works to the film's advantage.
You're in the wildwood, and every child will tell you that you've got no business to be here.
While it's a memorable sequence, there is one problem it has that goes for the other song sequences as well. They are way too short. I know there was a risk when adding a musical moment where you could pad out the running time or create a show-stopping moment that literally stops the whole show. But personally, if this was a musical, I wouldn't have mind. If these went on for an extra minute or maybe even another 30 seconds, I would be fine. Every song in this movie that comes up just starts and then ends right before it could even leave its mark. So at this point you're probably thinking to yourself, how could a movie like this go unnoticed on its release? And in regards to how the movie got distributed, I think I'll let director Terry Jones himself explain this one.
When the film came out in England, it was very badly distributed. It only went on in afternoons, and it didn't get any publicity. I felt very cross about the way it was treated. And because it did nothing in England, then Columbia, who had it for the rest of the world, and Disney, who had it for America, said, well, it's not going to do anything in our territories either. And then Disney were going to go straight to video with it. And then I was very surprised. I was in New York, and John Goldstein, producer, rang up to say the film's on in New York and LA. And it turned out that Columbia had realized that some of their distribution around the world relied on getting a US theatrical distribution. So they got the film off Columbia and put it out in a few cinemas in LA and a few cinemas in New York without any publicity, really, just to fulfill their contracts. And to their horror, it got these fantastic reviews. They've got the best reviews of anything I've ever been involved in, actually. The New York Times had a whole page on it, and the Variety came up with a series of editorials saying, why is sunny Columbia dumping this film? But it's kind of heartbreaking to see that, because it was too late. It never got any. In fact, I was in New York, and I went down, when John rang me, I went down to the Times Square, and there it was. There was a small hoarding with the name put on in those, those sticky letters. And so I went off to get a camera to take a photograph of it. And I bought one of those instant cameras, and by the time I got back to Times Square, it was off, honestly. But still, the film's there.
Ow! That's definitely worse than what happened to Seussical the Musical. Oh, and if you're wondering how a simple family feature like this could end up playing at an adult porno theater, here's a tip. When picking up something internationally to distribute over in America, and when you change its name to fit a theme park attraction ride that you own, make sure the name is well-fitting so that way people like this don't mistake it for something dirtier.
It's not very sexy, is it?
No. I wonder if they'd sell it. Of course, I'd have to test it first, just to be certain I really liked it.
I think this is for kids, you know, Eddie. I think those Hussein brothers saw you coming again.
Regardless, the final question is, should you see this movie? And the answer is a resounding yes. Terry Jones has placed so much effort and care into this adaptation that its existence can't be ignored. It's not a complete masterpiece and some elements don't work as well, but the rest of the movie makes for an enjoyable experience. I like the performances, the look of the movie is right for big screens, and the costume design not only adds the look of the character, but also who they are. It's a harmless vision that is not too risky to be removed from its own source, but knows where to update elements in order to make a version that works. While I admit there are better versions of this tale that I would recommend, heck, I'd say the one with Rick Camela's Toad is probably dead close to the book.
It's a delightful residence.
Oh, how kind of you! Oh, absolutely. Oh, it's the finest house on the whole river. It's only my way, you know.
At best, what Terry Jones does here is unique and all-around fun. If you're looking for something different but lighthearted and zany at best, I'd say give this one a chance and see for yourself. And being an enthusiast of Monty Python, it was nice to see Terry Jones do a near reunion with the entire cast while he had the chance. I mean, it's not everybody seeing Terry Gilliam's not in it, but it really just shows the importance of friendship. They're close by, they help out when you need them the most for certain projects like this, and they... I clearly remember I was only 5 episodes into the very first season of Vaulting, and I remember getting a message on YouTube from this bloke, you know, saying, hey, I think your material is great, I have this new site that I put out, I'm looking for new talent, would you be interested in joining? Thankfully, the link was in there and I checked the website out, and, you know, number one, I was happy it was a very legitimate site, it wasn't spam or anything. You know, opportunities like this come, you know, once in a lifetime, and very rarely do they literally knock at your door, so with those two things in mind, I said yes, and I was very thankful to do so, otherwise my show would have just either been not seen on YouTube or the channel just been terminated, and, you know, being online, making videos would have just been all for nothing, you know? Judy, what are you doing? I can't. Especially after what I did. I was kind of in a bad funk at the time, and I thought I could just vent all that frustration and stress out through videos like this, and turns out it wasn't the answer. I ended up blowing up at the wrong time, and decided to quit while I was ahead. I don't think he would forgive me after what I did. Apologize. To Mr. Coat? I guess it wouldn't hurt to try it, but well, the odds he would forgive me for it. Say. Mr. Coat.
Well, we know where we're going, but we don't know where we've been. And we know what we're knowing, but we can't say what we've seen. And we're not little children, and we know what we want, and the
we're home.
I found it! I found it!
What, the brake?
No! The accelerator!